Hello everyone, welcome to this video where we are going to dive into maximum matrix sum. So basically here you receive as input a matrix. I am supposed to maximize the sum of the element of the matrix, given that you can apply one operation, which is choosing two adjacent elements of the matrix and multiply each of them by -1. So what we are going to see here is just to see what's the observation we can make to maximize and find out how to transform that into code. So the ideal maximization that you can have is have all the elements of the matrix being positive and sum all of the elements. So that is the maximum possible you can have. But it will not always be possible for you to have everything being positive. What is interesting is that if you have a lot of negative, now the strategy is how can I maximize the number of positive elements that I can have. Okay, let's say I have something like this, for instance. There is no way for me to make this, like this one I'm showing, maximize than this one. If instead I was having a 1 year and a -3 year, that is one possible solution with just one negative element. There's no way for you to have less than one negative element, but there is one way for you to maximize the sum by making it such a way that the negative element is actually the minimum element that we have in our grid. So one observation is that since you can take two adjacent elements and multiply them by -1, this actually helps us to move the negative element wherever we want it to be. And if we can move the negative element wherever we want it to be, what does that mean? That means if I have -1 here, I can just multiply this one and this one by -1. I've moved the negative here. I can multiply this and this one by -1. I'll move the negative here, and so on. So by just considering this, we are sure that we can organize ourselves to have at most one negative element, and we need to make sure that that negative element is the minimum that we have in our array. Okay, so to summarize what we just say, what would be our strategy? Our strategy will be as follow. First thing, we are going to say, do we have an even number of negative elements? If we have an even number of negative elements, we need to know that in that case we can make everything positive, so we just return the sum of the absolute element, like the sum of all of the positive value of all the elements. If we have an odd number of negative elements, we need to check, do we have a 0? Because since we can move our negative wherever we want, we just need to make sure that that negative is going to 0, and in that case -0 is actually 0. There will be no negative. Okay, so so the two indicators you need to have is how many negative elements do you have and how many 0 do you have. And at the end of the day, you will have the sum of the positive element of all of the elements in the matrix, and the only element that will be negative is in the case where you don't have a 0 and you have an odd number of negative elements. In that case, there will be at least one negative element, and that negative element should just be the minimum element of the grid. And how do you implement such method? So to implement, you just need to have like a counter for the number of negative, a counter for the number of 0, and the minimum you can initialize it with, since the maximum value you can have is actually 10 power 5, so you can initialize it with 10 power 5. I just use int max, so use whatever you want. So you have an ounce here, which is the sum of the element of the grid, and now you look through all of the element of the grid and you sum the absolute difference. So this is actually the sum of all the positive elements. But now you want to evaluate those two elements. You want to count the negative and you want to count the negative and you want to count the 0. So if you find a 0, you increment the 0. If you find a negative, you increment the negative. And then now you just keep the minimum here with the syntax. Now at the end, like we just said previously, we have two scenarios where we know that there will be at least one negative. we have one scenario, and the scenario is if we have an odd number of negative element and zero and a count of zero element with value 0 in our grid. In that case, there will be at least one negative. Since the value of that negative has been added here as a positive, we need to first remove what has been added and remove now the negative value, which is removing twice of the minimum. And then now with that, we are going to have our answer. Let us submit. So perfect, working pretty well. So this was my approach of solving this. I hope you do enjoy it. Feel free to give me any input. I'll be really happy to interact with you regarding this. See you tomorrow for a new challenge. Take care, keep learning. Ciao.